There's this eternal struggle, right? You want that massive high-fidelity audio that really fills your room,
Yeah.
but you really don't want your living space looking like a recording studio.
Yeah, cluttered with all those massive black boxes everywhere. It is the classic battle between the audiophile and the interior designer.
Exactly, and usually someone has to lose that fight.
Yeah.
But today we are doing a deep dive into a piece of hardware that kind of claims a truce. We pulled the data sheets from HDTV Supply for the Kramer GALIL-6-I.
Right, the 6.5-inch two-way open-back in-wall speakers.
Yeah. So our mission today, for you listening, is really to understand how professional audio can essentially pull off a disappearing act.
And to see if it can do that without actually ruining the audio quality, because that is the real trick here.
Right. So let's start with the core engineering concept. The spec sheet calls it an infinite baffle design. Now, to the uninitiated, that sounds a bit like sci-fi technobabble.
It really does, yeah.
But in audio terms, this is actually about using the architecture of the room itself, isn't it?
Exactly. So in a traditional floor-standing speaker, you have a heavy wooden cabinet. And that's designed to trap the sound waves that come off the back of the speaker driver.
Because if you don't trap them, they kind of wrap around.
Right, they wrap around and cancel out the sound coming from the front, which just absolutely kills your bass. But with the GALIL-6-I, there is no box. That infinite baffle means the wall itself becomes the enclosure.
So the speaker just uses the huge volume of air inside your wall cavity to separate those front and back waves.
Which is super elegant, but it does put a lot of pressure on the components to be versatile since they aren't sitting in a carefully tuned box.
Well, looking at the build materials, Kramer went with a polypropylene cone for the 6.5-inch woofer. That seems pretty specific for an in-wall setup.
It is the smart choice here. I mean, paper cones sound great, but paper absorbs moisture, and inside a wall, the humidity fluctuates a lot.
Oh, sure, I didn't even think about the humidity inside the wall.
Yeah, it's a real issue. So polypropylene is rigid and consistent, and crucially, it has excellent dampening properties, so it stops vibrating the microsecond the signal stops.
Meaning you get really punchy audio and those muddy echoes bouncing around inside the drywall.
Right, and then for the high end, they paired it with a 1-inch silk dome tweeter.
I always find the silk interesting because metal tweeters usually just look cooler on a spec sheet.
Metal definitely measures well, but it can be really harsh on the ears, especially at high volumes. Silk just offers a much smoother roll-off.
Which makes sense if you're installing these in a living room where, music might be playing for hours. Silk is just way less fatiguing.
Exactly.
Let's talk about actually filling that room, though. The dispersion spec really jumped out at me. It says 107 degrees of coverage.
That is massive. Most traditional box speakers beam sound in a much narrower cone. A 107-degree dispersion means you do not have to fight for the sweet spot on the couch.
The audio just washes evenly across the whole space. Which brings us to performance. The datasheet lists the frequency response from 50 Hz to 20 kHz. Getting down to 50 Hz is pretty respectful for a 6.5-inch driver.
It gives you a very full sound for casual listening. If you are building a dedicated home theater, you'd obviously still want a subwoofer for those floor-shaking rumbles. But for music, this covers the spectrum really well.
And regarding power, I'm seeing 80 watts RMS, but 220 watts continuous program. Let's translate that for the listener.
Sure. The 80 watts RMS is your cruising speed. That is the continuous power it can handle comfortably all day.
Okay. And the 220 watts?
That's your headroom. It means when an action movie has a sudden explosion or a symphony hits a massive crescendo, the speaker has the capacity to handle that sudden spike without distorting.
It's a safety margin, basically. Now, none of this matters if the thing doesn't actually fit into the wall. I have seen architectural speakers that require building out completely false walls because they are just too dug.
You don't have to worry about that here. The mounting depth is just 7 centimeters, which is about 2.76 inches.
Wow, that fits easily into a standard stud bay with room to spare. And I noticed the installation mechanism uses these locking arms.
Installers absolutely love those. You just insert the speaker, turn the screws from the front, and these clamps swing out behind the drywall to sandwich it tight. It is fast and really minimizes vibration.
One detail I totally missed at first glance, but is actually critical, is the grills. They are aluminum, which is standard, but the spec sheet specifically mentions UV treatment compliance.
Hugely important detail. White plastic and paint tend to yellow when they are exposed to sunlight over a few years.
Oh, right, and if you have pristine white walls, a yellowing speaker grill is going to look terrible.
Exactly. The UV treatment keeps it totally invisible over time.
Speaking of value, HDTV Supply has these discounted to around $256 right now, down from the MSRP of $320.
For a pair of professional-grade drivers using silk and polypropylene, that is a very competitive price point. You are getting professional integration for the price of a mid-range Bluetooth speaker.
So I guess the big takeaway for you listening is this. We are finally moving past the era where good sound required big furniture. The GALIL-6-I really proves that if you leverage the architecture correctly, the wall itself can do the work of the cabinet.
High fidelity that actually respects the room design.
Here's a thought to leave you with, though. As we move toward designs like this infinite baffle, where the speakers quite literally vanish into the structure, does the room itself stop being just a container for the sound and start becoming the instrument?
That is a really fascinating way to look at it.
Something to think about next time you stare at a blank wall. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.